So I'm going to read you this article, but I'll comment about it as I go along as well. So if you don't want to actually read the article, or if you'd like to hear my comments about it, you can watch this video. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but here we go. The name of this article is How to Care About Self-Care. And so I tell the story of how this came about. Be here now. At the beginning of my coaching groups, I guide participants for 3 to 5 minutes to help them arrive in the present moment. Participants join from all over the world, so they are in a different time zone often. It could be early afternoon for me in the Western US, late evening in Europe, or tomorrow morning in Australia. Regardless of the time of the day, it is always now when we begin in the group. That seems obvious, but the problem, of course, that we have is that when we gather 7, 8, 9 people together, often our minds are in different places. We've built momentum up from the day. Our parts are actually wanting to still do what we were doing before we signed on to Zoom for the group session. So in that first 2 or 3 minutes, I help people get present. Back to the article, but being here now, as Ram Dass teaches, can be challenging. So by focusing on something that is happening now, such as the breath, body sensations, sounds, participants find their way back from whatever has been getting their conscious attention prior to arriving in the coaching session. The momentum of whatever has been happening converges as up to 8 group participants join with a common intention to recover their authentic selves using the IFS model. At the end of the opening guided meditation that I provide, I invite participants to do an external check-in. I give them 1 minute each to report what is happening inside at the moment. So they've done this internal check-in, and often what they'll do in these groups when they have their 1 minute to do the external check-in is they'll just mention, this is what was happening with my parts during the internal check-in. Other times they'll mention other things that are going on in their lives right now that get their attention. Back to the article. 60 seconds isn't very long, but having arrived in the present moment, group participants have enough self-awareness to clearly report what is so for them. Self-care. During the external check-in in a recent group, I heard reports of fatigue and feeling overwhelmed. This article was written, and I'm recording this video just a few weeks after the US election. A lot of people are having big, strong reactions to the election, and so it's not uncommon for me recently to be hearing how overwhelmed and fatigued people are. When the last participant finished sharing, I commented that I heard a common theme: self-care. 7 nodding heads on my computer screen validated my assertion. That's how many participants I had that day, was 7. They all were nodding their heads, yes. Self-care would be a great thing to talk about today. As often happens in my groups, I ask the participants to do some journaling. Setting a timer for 2 minutes, I ask them to notice their internal reactions to the concept of self-care. What happens inside when I mention the word self-care, I asked. The participants began to type or write their thoughts as I considered what those words meant to me. So if you'd like to do this exercise now, I encourage you to pause this video and answer the question, what happens inside when I mention the word self-care? Maybe set yourself a timer, or just answer the question until you're ready to come back to the video. Self-care, I'm reading the article again now, self-care, I thought, seems a little selfish and indulgent. I thought of bubble baths, massages, and manicures. So I've hired several coaches over the years, and practically every one of them has urged me to take self-care and make self-care more of a priority. But I've never been able to justify the cost in time or money for what I perceive to be luxuries. Recently, my thoughts about self-care has shifted. I now think of self-care as saying yes to what I want and no to what I don't want. My clients and people that know me well have heard me often say I don't ever do anything I don't want to do. And in fact, on a recent podcast episode with my co-host Marty, Dr. Martin Kettlehead, Marty, we talked about do only what you want to do. It's an interesting episode, but the idea is that we kind of lie to ourselves sometimes about what it is that we have chosen to do, and yet we make ourselves victims of it. I found years ago that if I can shift that in my mind, help the parts of me remember that there's been a choice made. I'm doing this because there's something that I want to either get or avoid getting by doing it. So in other words, I always choose it. I'm only doing what I want to do. And I have not found a single incident in the last 10 years of anything I've ever done that I didn't want to do in some way. So recently, back to the article again, recently my thoughts about self-care have shifted. I now think of self-care as saying yes to what I want and no to what I don't want. So the next section is called Your Parts. When the timer sounded, I set it for another 2 minutes and asked the participants to journal about the question, what parts showed up when you wrote about self-care? So if you're following along and doing the exercise yourself, go ahead and pause the video now and answer the question, what parts showed up when you wrote about self-care? And when you're ready, come on back. Returning to the article, under Your Parts, I encourage my clients to view themselves through the IFS lens, acknowledging that what they think, feel, and do is influenced by parts of them that are trying in some way to help. So this question made sense to them, the participants of my group. By exploring thoughts and emotions related to the self-care trailhead, each participant exercised curiosity, which expanded their self-awareness, which are two crucial elements of personal transformation. I looked at the clock. We still had plenty of time, so I sent the participants off in pairs to breakout rooms for 15 minutes. I paired up with the participant and listened as she shared her thoughts about self-care. She reported what she sensed and knew about the parts of her that influenced her perspective, paralleling much of my own perspective. Unconditional positive regard. Returning to the main group, I gave the participants 1 minute to answer the next question. Who do you have unconditional positive regard for? So if you're answering these questions, pause now and come on back when you're ready. I'm currently listening to Cheryl Strayed is maybe the way she pronounced that, audiobook, Tiny Beautiful Things, and have been impressed by the power of unconditional positive regard. What happens in the relationship between attuned individuals. It's what we needed as children, and it's what we chase after as adults when we don't get enough of it growing up. When the time went off, I set it for another 2 minutes and asked, what do you want for them? What do you want for these people that you have unconditional positive regard for? So that's the question. Pause the video now and journal your answer to what do you want for those people? And when you're ready, come on back. What do you want for those who you have unconditional positive regard for those who you love and offer the benefit of the doubt to? Now that the participants were focused on someone they loved and cared about, they could view the concept of self-care through a fresh, untarnished lens. I reset the timer for 2 more minutes and asked the 5th question. So here we go. The 5th question is, how would you like them to care for themselves? These people who you have unconditional positive regard for, how would you like them to care for themselves? Journal your answers and come on back when you're ready. So here's someone you love and care about unconditionally. No matter what they've done wrong, no matter how flawed you perceive them to be, you want the best for them. You still regard them in a positive light. How do you want them to treat themselves? Now under the heading, how do you care for you? And we're almost finished with the article here, so we're almost finished with the video. The next question asks the participants to place themselves in the same positive regard. What are you realizing about how you care for yourself? While the group answered the question, I set up breakout rooms. After 2 minutes, I sent them off in pairs again for 10 minutes. So the question again is, what are you realizing about how you care for yourself? So take your time, journal your answers, and then come on back. So in those breakout rooms, I was paired up with a different participant this time. Like me, he'd grown up believing that caring about and caring for himself was selfish. I could really relate to that. Caring about others earned approval, but he learned to be hard on himself and believed he didn't deserve the same love and care he was expected to give to others. And now we're wrapping up to the end here, so make a difference. With just a few minutes remaining in the 90-minute group session that I've been referring to, I asked the participants what they would now do with their insights. So this is really important, I believe, especially with the IFS model, that we get all these great insights, but if we don't do something with them, then we don't actually integrate them, and it doesn't really make much of a difference in our lives. I think that's basically what I'm saying here. It's great to see what we've been lying to, but if we don't act on the information, it really doesn't make a difference in our lives. That's it. So what are you realizing? And what will you do to have your insights make a difference for you? I hope you've enjoyed the article and the video. If you have comments, there's a place to make comments underneath the article.